All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon. I hope everyone's been having a good start to your week. My name is Dana Howarth. I'm the Deputy Director of the New Mexico Caregivers Coalition. This is our fourth session in our March Dementia series with our guest speakers joining us today. Before we move on to them, just some quick kind of housekeeping. If you haven't already said hi in the chat, please do so. Or you can change your name on your screen so that we can see that you are here. We do take attendance in all of our classes to make sure everyone gets credit for being here. So we would appreciate if we can make sure that we can have access to your name so we can mark you as present. For those that might be new or maybe joining us, are still new to our program, the New Mexico Caregivers Coalition is a small nonprofit in New Mexico, located in Bernalillo, but we provide training to folks across the state of New Mexico and parts of Arizona, thanks to our partnership with Valerie Sosi on the Navajo Nation. So Valerie, if you want to say hi real fast.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for bearing with us and making it. Hope you guys enjoy an amazing class today. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Valerie. So today's session is going to be extremely interactive. Our presenters are going to do kind of a presentation at the first half of today's session, and then the second half is going to be completely questions. We want you to ask as many questions as you want. You can put them in the chat, or you're welcome to raise your hand, and we start taking questions. We can call on you one by one to make sure everyone gets a chance to speak. Before I pass it on to our guest speakers, I would like if everyone could please answer me one question in the chat. That is whether or not you are a family caregiver or a paid caregiver or both. So if you're a family caregiver, please put family caregiver in the chat. If you're a paid caregiver, please put paid caregiver in the chat. You can be both. That's also welcome. If you're neither, go ahead and put neither also. This is kind of just helping us get an idea of who's in today's session, especially because it's going to be really like Q&A, question, open discussion. It kind of gives us an idea of who and what kind of demographics we have in today's class. So thank you all for doing that. Now I'm going to pass it on to Ruth Dennis, our guest speaker. And for most of you, she's been here so many times, I don't even, I know her everything will speak for herself. So thank you, Ruth. Welcome.
Thank you guys very much. We're doing kind of a two-part, so I'll give you guys a run through of what we're doing. I'm gonna start with a lot of my experience as a family caregiver and what happens after you're not a family caregiver. We're also going to go into questions, and we have Luke and Julie here. And Laura, I want you and Valerie to also feel free to speak up. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna use some music and some pictures. So to talk about what our experience is caregivers. The music that we're gonna use is actually a gospel song, if you actually read the nature of it, but I used it as a really good way to describe what caregivers go through and what our commitment is as caregivers. Both, and this is true both for families and for professionals. Everybody on this call in some form or fashion is putting themselves on the line and their work and their lives on the line to care for and provide a better life for someone else. So the reason for the music is to really understand the depth of what that commitment is. And one of the things I realized is that, and I think all of us, if we start thinking about it, I've been a caregiver in some form or fashion since I was 3 years old. And I'm going to have Dana pull up a picture and pull up a song.
Okay, so to be able to get this to work for both, I do have to start playing the song first and then bring the photo up in front of it so that way.
And remember, the song is about what the commitment of being a caregiver really means.
You are not hidden. There's never been a moment you were forgotten. You are not hopeless. Though you have been broken, your innocence stolen, I hear you whisper underneath your breath. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. There is no distance that cannot be covered over and over. You're not defenseless. I'll be your shelter, I'll be your armor. I hear you whisper underneath your breath. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. I will never stop marching to reach you in the middle of the hardest fight. It's true, I will rescue you. I hear the whisper underneath your breath. I hear you whisper you have nothing left. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. I will never stop marching to reach you in the middle of the hardest fight. It's true, I will rescue you. Oh, I will rescue you.
What caregiving is putting the needs of someone else as your top priority. And one of the things we keep coming back to over and over again is how not to lose ourselves in that. One of the things I figured out is that there was a point where I lost myself in that. I want to get Dana, bring up another picture. I have someone I need to introduce you to. And Dana, if you could bring up the second picture. This is Glenn Morgan Dennis. This is my brother. Morgan was one of the toughest, most stubborn human beings I will ever meet. Wicked smart, talked to only a handful of people, myself being the primary one, Luke's son being one of them, actually. But also the focus of my life as a caregiver. One of the reasons that my work at Vista became so important to me was Morgan's influence. Morgan was an artist. He was a painter. He played drums. Morgan also lived with me. I was a family caregiver. While I was a family caregiver, I was working with Vista and with Alzheimer's. I realized after Morgan died that the way we talk about grief, the way we talk about loss lacks a lot. The traditional model of grief is you go through stages and the stages make sense and they work in line. The stages don't make sense. One of the things that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said at the end of her life was she wished she hadn't made it linear. That denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, they didn't work in a nice, neat little line. They bounced around. And that's true. I would add a couple of things to that. And you can take the picture off anytime you want, or you can keep it up. I would add shock as a stage. I would add exhaustion as a stage. The last couple of years, we've been dealing with COVID. And there's a tendency to say professional caregivers are over here and family caregivers are over here, and treat the experiences as different. They're not. When I was talking to, I kept in touch with two friends after Morgan died, and they had been through very similar experiences. I cared for my brother, who in some form or fashion I've been caring for since I was 3 years old. I was 55 when he died. They cared for their husbands. In both cases, they cared for men who were their soulmates and part of their souls. One had been married for 30 years, 34 years. The other had lost her partner a couple of days before their 20th anniversary. And we got to talk, we would talk off and on, more in the 6 months after we lost people than we had in years. And we kept coming up with very similar experiences. And the first one was, I was in shock. One of my friends her husband had Lewy body disease, with severe behavioral issues. She knew this was coming, but she was still in shock. With my brother, Morgan had been on hospice for 4 years. He had been having health changes for more than 6. The last couple of years, he had cognitive issues. He was getting Alzheimer's. My friend Elisa, her husband died of ALS, of Lou Gehrig's disease. She turned her living room in an apartment in New York City into a hospital for 2 years. All of us knew this was coming, but it was still a shock. The second thing that came up, and this is before we could even experience the loss, was exhaustion. And there are different ways to be exhausted. There's a way to be exhausted where you need a good night's sleep. There's another way to be exhausted, which is where you need a long, long time. And in our cases, all of us, we were exhausted for 6 or 8 months. And it took a long time to feel like we were somewhat ourselves again. And that brings us back to the grief discussion. In Stress Busters, we use a different pattern of talking about grief, which is talking about grief like it's a wheel. You start out normal, and this applies not just to death. This applies to any major loss or any major change. Even things that are positive, starting a new business, getting married, changing a job, getting a divorce, bankruptcy, any of these things can be major losses. Graduating from college, because they cause stress. You're starting out at a normal, and you're going into a loss or a major change, and you have to process that. And part of you is going to argue about it in your head. I don't want this to happen. Why is this happening? This is scary. And then you move from that into this kind of chaotic, disorganized. You feel everything at once. One day you're perfectly fine and life is good. The next day you're crying, or you're scared, or you're angry. And then you slowly, gradually move into starting to rebuild the world, to remake your life. You reorganize things, you put things back together, and you come out not at the old normal, not where you were before, but at a new normal, a different place. And you keep going on that wheel every time you hit a change. And I think the big mistake that we make when we talk about grief is we talk about it as something that should neatly fit in a box and go away. It doesn't. It also is not necessarily always a bad thing. In the depth of my grief, I was more creative than I'd ever been. I also learned how to reach out and ask for help. I got really, really good when I was caring for Morgan at dealing with waiver systems, dealing with Medicaid, dealing with what he needed to have a good life. And I was aggressive about it, and I was relentless about it. When it came to myself, I wasn't. I had to learn that. One of my best teachers actually in that was Luke's dad, Joe. And it was, Ruth, figure out what you need to survive and be safe and healthy, and just do it. Don't think twice. As caregivers, we don't think twice about doing that for the person we're caring for. We do for ourselves, but for ourselves, it can be very, very different. And it was, for me, very, very different. I was really good at making a middle class life for Morgan. And I loved the life I put together with Morgan. I loved being able to have the time for him and have the space for him And I have to give a shout out to Vista for being a huge part of that. Morgan was always part of our community and our lives. He would go and sit and was talking with some friends last week about Morgan and one of our elders, Robert. And Robert got Morgan interested in old movies. They would drink sodas on afternoons if my caregivers was sick and watch old movies. And Morgan got to a point where there was an old movie from the 30s, 40s, and 50s sci-fi show and old horror movies. And he had to watch that every Saturday night. You could not plan anything other than that being on TV on Saturday night. And that was the ritual. And he picked it up from one of our elders at Vista. What I wasn't prepared for in the after piece of caregiving was the silence, the quiet. All of a sudden, I had this life that was different. Realized, talking to some friends, I think maybe it was Luke, that the last time I'd lived alone in a home was when I was 17 or 18 years old in my first apartment in college. Other than that, I was either living with Morgan as a caregiver. I helped take care of a friend's children when she was in school. I lived with boyfriends and husband and Morgan. And so all of a sudden, for the first time since I was 17, I lived alone. And it was at first there was this huge creativity. I painted all the time. And then there was this silence and this quiet. And I had to relearn how to be Ruth and how to be Ruth in different terms. And how does that apply to professional caregivers? Family caregivers, it's kind of accepted that you're on 24/7. Not a good thing to accept. You're physically, nobody can do it. Professional caregivers are also on 24/7. They just do it in a different way. I think the guilt and the loss is very true for both. Made the mistake of, just before this lecture, looking at 2 or 3 statistics, which I shouldn't have. I should look at, but I shouldn't. Professional caregivers have always, the numbers have been ticking up over the last 10 years. First, it was about 30% leaving the field, ticked up to 40%, ticked up to 45 to 50 during COVID. Now, in the most critical areas of care, nursing homes, hospitals, assisted living, ERs, the level of people leaving the field is at 58%. That's not just sad, it's frightening. And it's something we all have to start working to change. Also looked at the stats for family caregivers dying before the person they're caring for. For 20 something years that I've been doing this work as a professional, it's hovered around 30%, 35%. During COVID, they haven't been able to get good stats for it because they haven't been able to sort out what's COVID and what's not. Guess is the same trajectory that's happening with professionals, could be starting to happen with families. Taking care of yourself is no longer something that is a sideline or something that is something you pick up when you have the time for. It's survival. It's not just survival for you. It's survival for all of us at this point, because those numbers are just way, way too high. And they're way too high because that ability to do anything you can to fight for somebody, we need to hammer it into all of our heads, both family and professional caregivers, that it's necessary. You have to do it for yourself with as much intensity as for the person you're caring for. There's no choice in this matter at this point. I am deeply, deeply blessed and honored to be around people that are actually talking about this stuff, that are really working with how do we process grief? How do we process life? And how do we come back in a way that's creative? It's odd. I've had this silly little coping mechanism the last couple months. I have gotten really interested in a couple certain games on my phone, sound stuff, but they are a way to space out and to get away from kind of constantly overthinking. But in these games, you can see when you're starting to lose. You can see a move or two, if you're not reading the whole board, that if you keep making the same move, you're going to lose. That's very, very true with caregivers, with burnout. Both family caregivers burn out, so do professional caregivers. It looks a little different, but you can see it coming. For family caregivers, there's a statement that I've heard family caregivers make, and I've made. I just need to hold on long enough to make sure they're okay. Very noble, beautiful sounding statement, except what that means is there are certain things I'm not paying attention to. I'm not watching the whole board. I'm setting myself up to lose. And for me, the things I wasn't paying attention to were, was I sleeping on a regular basis? And was I sleeping consistently? I was getting too many headaches and I was coughing too much. And my garden started to die. I lost a tree, a rose bush, and a lilac bush. And sounds very, very silly. But what that meant was a very visual cue that I wasn't paying attention to the whole board. I wasn't watching, I wasn't saving space for Ruth, and I'd lost her. That affected my work, and that brings back to professionals. One of the things I've heard professionals say is, I can keep going. We just need to knuckle down and just keep going. I'm out of patience. I'm really tired of this. Or the first thing you can come up with is what's wrong instead of what's right. That means what that is a cue that you're not paying attention to the whole board. Any one of us on this call can become that person that we don't think we could ever be. We can be that exhausted family caregiver that doesn't have fun anymore. We can be that burnout cranky nurse, or that doctor who doesn't want to spend time with people, or that boss who won't pick up the phone or who just criticizes. All of us have that potential, but we have a choice of whether or not we're going to see the whole board. I am honored to work with folks who see the whole board and who really have kept the compassion and the love. I've also seen what happens when people don't. And I think we can't kid ourselves, both as families and as professionals, that we can get lost. And there's no room right now for any of us to get lost. One of the places is that the world needs caregivers. And caring for Morgan was two things. One, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. But two, it was the most creative, amazing, and beautiful thing I've ever done. I got the honor of caring for a man who was smart, who was tough, who was incredibly creative, who loved music and art and food, and loved people and could read people. I got the honor of being more creative because I was around him. The same with our elders at Vista. I get the honor of being with people who know how to be alive, who know how to be kind of in love with life and in love with their animal companions, with learning how to put one color next to another in painting, with holding somebody's hand, with old movies. And that is special. And I think the antidote to burnout and to leaving the field is, and the antidote to being an exhausted family caregiver is, we have to take care of ourselves with as much passion as we do the people we care for. I want you to close your eyes for a second. Take a really deep breath. Put your hand on your heart. And just think about what you can do in a very, very clear way to provide that care. Is it something really straightforward and practical? Do I need to email that lawyer? Is it something that I need to exercise? Is it something that I need to actually make a time to talk to my boss? Hang on a second. Okay, we're gonna open our eyes. We're gonna open up the chat. I'm gonna bring Julie and Luke back. And we're gonna start.
Let me have your.
So let's kind of start. If you have a question, put it in the chat or raise your hand. And it can be about anything. It's kind of an anything goes. So let's open up. Valerie, are we ready? Hello?
You mean Dana?
Dana, sorry. Are we ready to kind of open up for questions?
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay, everyone. Feel free to put your questions in the chat or raise your hand. Like Ruth said, it is open. If there's any questions that you've come up with since previous sessions, maybe you didn't get a chance to ask in a previous session, we do have two of the panelists presenters from those previous sessions returning. So they're here if you have questions for them. Or maybe just any other general family caregiver questions or professional caregiver questions. Because two of our presenters do work working with Vista Living, which is a facility. So feel free to ask any questions. I haven't seen any in the chat yet. So whoever wants to go, feel free to jump right in. The floor is open.
And guys, I know I went slightly over. I apologize.
Go ahead, Laura.
First of all, thank you, Ruth. That was a really beautiful, it was a beautiful tribute. You're a poet, a poet, a poet. I wanted to say one thing. In my studies of the of Kubler-Ross, I had another one that I would add to her, and that is a confusion.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with dementia, if you lose somebody to dementia, the sense of, do I grieve now or do I not grieve now? Am I relieved now? Am I relieved they're dead? Am I grieving now? And I think that's a really valid point, because just or then you get really angry and then you're just really confused. Why was I so angry? I was so angry. So I think the Kubler-Ross could add, as you added one, I think we could add another one, which is confusion. Actually, all the human emotions that drive us, sometimes really happy. When I lost my mother after 14 years, there was a part of me that was ready to just like, I was young, but there was a part of me that was ready to really say, oh my God, I can go back to my life now. And that to me is a really important part of grieving, is to have those emotional, but as you say, the emotional releases are really, they really are a gift in a way, things that you've held down for years.
I remember texting a friend of mine, and this was, I think, in March or April after Morgan had passed. And it sounds really stupid, but I bought lipstick for the first thing. And realized, my friend and I got to chatting, and she said, I remember this. I went through a phase when my boys were little, where I didn't pay any attention to any of that stuff. And then I bought lipstick. And so like, oh, part of me went, thank God I'm not the only idiot out there who buys lipstick. But I think there's a friend of mine said she felt bad for feeling good.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big piece for family caregivers. Yeah. And remember, with Alzheimer's, you're not grieving one loss. You're grieving hundreds of them. You know, and a lot of times people grieve what could have been. And that's not just about death. That's with work, that's with marriages, that's with divorces, that's anything we do. That's a major change.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think for me, creativity, like cranking the music really, really loud and painting like crazy. I painted every day for hours a day for a couple of months. Mm-hmm. And I lost touch with that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So Ruth, I have a question. Laura, well said on confusion, especially with Alzheimer's and dementia. I couldn't agree more. So Ruth, you spoke of the antidote of burnout and stuff. And I, as a family caregiver, in a different sense, that's not an elder, it's my kids. And then working in this world, I think it's very easy to say, yeah, I need to do that, but I can't. Mm-hmm. and come up with all the reasons that you're not going to do self-care, you're not going to. Can you share an example of someone that you've seen in your personal or professional career that did this well, and what that looked like?
Actually, I can say in some ways a mentor of mine, Sharon Lewis. One of the things she talks about a lot in Stress Busters is that it doesn't have to take an hour or half an hour, that you can do little things constantly to take care of yourself. I think Melissa Smith is another real good mentor on that, in really kind of, the woman runs a business, is in graduate school and has a teenager, and she keeps a life. And I think knowing when to keep a life is really, really important. I think there are, for professional caregivers, there are health structures that are healthy and structures that aren't. I am really blessed to work in one that's healthy. But we struggle with it, and we work with it, and we talk about it. I think that I had a nurse practitioner friend, and she was talking about your body, but the truth is it applies to everything, which is something that keeps happening. If you don't pay attention to it, will bite you in the butt. And I'm not putting this as well as she did. But basically, if you're ignoring something in your life and it keeps coming back, whether it's a headache or a cough, or whether it's not sleeping well, or you're getting a little more cranky with your husband or your kids every day, but you're trying to ignore it, anything that you ignore will bite you. And I think it's that paying attention. My friend who set up a hospital in her living room, kept a punching bag on her balcony. And honestly, that was one of the most healthy ways of dealing with a caregiver that I've ever heard. That she would go out and she would get some exercise and she would vent some emotion and she would feel better. And she didn't spend hours and hours on the punching bag, but it was there so she could spend a few minutes every time she needed it, just walloping that punching bag. Another friend had a Damn It doll, which is like a little voodoo doll that she could just pound around and stomp on when she was stressed out. She called it the Damn It doll. I think a lot of us do really little things that can really help. I also think there's something really freeing, and I'm going to pick on Julie, in dealing with the practical stuff head on and getting it over with, which I have not totally done, but I'm starting. But you kind of take it one bite at a time and you face it. So, Lara, you're raising your hand.
I'm raising my hand again, if it's okay. I have my own system of care of when I talk to caregivers about their problem, and it has something to do with the confusion. It seems to me that when caregivers are caregiving, one of the things that happens is you turn your focus on somebody else, but you completely lose track of yourself, as you said. And sometimes caregivers say to me, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do, what I want to do. I have no idea what I like. I don't know what I like anymore. I don't know so they get very confused. And I think one of the things that have helped me the most and have helped people that I know is to deal with going through your five senses. Because our five senses are the way that we take information from the world and put it into our brains. And this is how we decide whether we like something or don't like something. So when trying to figure out, I don't even know what I like or don't like anymore. Do I like exercise? Do I like to take baths? Do I like shampoo? I don't even know. I don't know anymore. And to go through the five senses by yourself, because we're each so different in personalities. What you like, Ruth, I don't like. What I don't like, you love. I give the example of oatmeal. I hate oatmeal. I hate oatmeal. Don't do that to me. But when I get very stressed out and I'm at the bottom, I say, what's one thing that I have seen that I like? Well, I like to see horses. What's one thing that I've heard that I like to hear? Well, it's bird song, probably. Sometimes punk music, but mostly bird song. What's one thing that I like to touch and feel? Because what I like to feel and touch is very different from everyone else. And then one thing that I like to smell and one thing that I like to taste, and write a list with many of those things of what I really like and what I don't like. So that as you're going through the grieving thing and something comes up like the dog takes a crap on the carpet. You don't like that, but you've got to take care of yourself because that's like the last straw. You can go to your list and say, okay, give me one thing that I like. Well, I like to look at horses. So I'm going to go off, drive around until I see a horse across a fence that I can just say hi to. But something that is personally mine, that I personally like. I like yoga and stuff, but I don't do yoga when I'm sad. That's like work. I love the after effect, but I can't wait for the after effect. I've got to deal with the 5 senses right now when I'm sad. And that's
I also, and I realized I forgot to have Dana bring up a picture. I forgot to have Dana bring up the garden picture. But one of the things, and Dana's, yay, this is my garden last summer. It's not dead. Which sounds really silly, but it falls into the sensory thing. How do you recover from burnout?
Yeah.
I think one of them is the sensory. Go to something that you love and just keep doing it.
Yeah.
You can take the garden picture off now, but the garden is very much alive. And that was a revelation. That was like, okay, wow, this is really, we're in recovery now. This is better. I think the other is you don't get over things that you don't talk about. And that's family caregivers, professional caregivers, everybody. How many, just show of hands. And I'm going to pick on bosses, so forgive me, Luke. How many of you guys have had a situation where you were really, oh God, I don't want to talk. I'm embarrassed to talk about this. I don't want to talk. I can't ask this person for help. Whether it's your boss, your doctor, whoever, lawyer, God forbid lawyer. I mean, that's even worse. And when you actually finally brought it up and asked, it was fine. It was okay.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody ever have those situations? The putting it off and to not being willing to talk about it was a lot worse than actually talking about it was. You know, so if you don't ask, you're never going to find out. And that's true across the board. And there are certain people nobody wants to talk to. Alzheimer's specialists, lawyers, most doctors, God forbid bosses, you know, but 99% of them don't bite. You know, so. I'm not checking the chat. Anything interesting?
I have not seen questions. I've been trying to get folks to ask questions in the chat.
We've got a shy group today.
I think it speaks to how well you've presented, Ruth.
Mm-hmm.
You've answered the questions over 4 weeks.
I also, one of the things I think is really good about, I really want to thank Julie and Luke, is we all need people around us that think differently than we do, and that structure, and Valerie, you too in this, and you've got to have other opinions. You can't do, it's impossible to do this on your own. You've got to have that point of view from somebody who thinks differently, because we all see it differently. I think honestly, my best teacher in that has been Luke's dad, because he's a money guy and he doesn't find it intimidating and he doesn't find it embarrassing or scary. And it was like, oh, wow, you mean that's normal? And, you know, because we can get so wrapped up in our point of view And it's very true with caregivers. We get so wrapped up in, oh my God, it has to be done just the way I do it for mom or dad or brother. And it doesn't. Sometimes they actually really enjoy somebody who does it a little different than you. And that's okay. Big reason respite is good. Remember having a lady who was she was 99 and a half. Daughter worried about placing mom and Sierra for respite for months and months and months, and finally did it because she had a wedding to go to. Came back, asked mom how everything went. Mom laughed at her and she said, oh, it was really fun. It was a great time. She said, but the men were all way too old for me. 99 and a half. It was a big relief to die because she hadn't missed her daughter at all. She was like, okay, this is fun. And it doesn't always work that perfectly, but you know, they need another point of view too.
I actually have a question coming off from something you just said, Ruth. How can someone who's not like a main caregiver to a family member offer help to the main family caregiver, like the main people that are doing the caregiving, who may not be necessarily receptive to it, but as an outsider, you kind of can tell they're very stressed and on a probably edge of burnout, but kind of refuse to take help? Like, what are some things that the other family members can do to maybe offer some help?
I think sometimes doing things without asking.
Yeah.
One of my friends showed up at the door one time when I was a caregiver with pizza, and she cleaned my bathrooms, and that was a really amazing thing. That helped. I think sometimes a gift can be a good way to get somebody to take a little bit of care for themselves, because they'll feel guilty if they don't use it. And guilt is a double-edged sword. Sometimes it's a bad thing. Sometimes it can be used to your advantage. So if you give someone a gift of, I bought you a ticket to this Alzheimer's conference and I paid for the respite. So, you know, it would really make me feel better if you went. Sometimes I think sometimes just being present with people. Thank you very much for what you're doing. It means a lot. That's been the approach I've tried to take with the hospitals for the last couple of years is, you know, I don't want to overwhelm you with stuff, but thank you guys for what you're doing. Here's some coffee and chocolate, and here's my number. I think a simple thing like buying someone, you know, a self-care package with some tea and some Vicks and some, if they have the flu, can help. I think I believe in prayer. I believe that helps. One of my friends, and I don't think she realized that she helped me as much as she did when Morgan was sick, kind of gave me permission to get back in touch with faith again as a positive thing. And that made such a huge difference in the last couple of years as a family caregiver, but also as a professional, that I'll never forget it. I never, you know, one of the things I don't think people ever forget is when someone is deeply, truly kind to them.
Ruth, we have a question in the chat from Casey. She
Okay.
says, my husband is at the Arbors I feel guilty that I don't visit him often enough, but I feel so sad after seeing him, so I avoid going to see him. How do I deal with my feelings?
I think one of the pieces with guilt is, I think any decision that you make in love, and placement is one of those decisions that you make in love, is a good caregiving decision. I think your husband knows, I know with my brother, I know with every elder I've worked with at Vista, and Luke can chime in on this. They know who you are, and they know that you're part of their soul, and they have a different perception of time than you do. I've seen elders who haven't seen a family member for a week or two, or during COVID, and they thought they saw him this morning, and they're sure they talked to him this morning. I've seen other elders whose daughter visited twice on the same day forget that they visited. So time works differently with dementia, and connection works differently. He knows you love him. He may not know how many days it's been since you've seen him, but every time you see him, he knows you love him. I think it's also another piece to this is people with Alzheimer's they're emotional sponges. And this is one of the reasons that burnout is so dangerous, is they pick up your emotions and they respond in kind. So if you're deeply sad and need time to process that, taking that time is a gift to him, because when you see him again, you'll be more clear. And Lara and Luke, I'm going to get you guys to chime in on this one too.
Well, really quick, I was going to say that for people who deal with that, is compassion fatigue, what Ruth is talking about. So if you want to look it up, I put it in the chat there. It's called compassion fatigue. Second, you have to think about, like we're talking about perceptions, your loved one, your person, usually it's going to be someone close to you. Do you really think they want you to live your life that way?
Mm-hmm.
Think about it in that point. And if they're not there at that point, that's where you have to start talking to your person about that, especially in the beginning stage where they're able to do that versus the end. The end will be definitely a lot different. So, and then just think about, again, how would your person want you to live? Would they want that for you? To have you be run down and sad and upset, would they want you to feel guilty? That's where it can kind of help as well with your feelings and going through working that out. And really though, you have to ask yourself those type of questions. But that's all I have.
I also think that it's better to meet them in joy than it is in sadness. Meet the person in joy. There's a prayer, and Julie, you might know this one, but basically it's saying, don't grieve my loss, but celebrate life, celebrate the life that you've been given. And that's true. I think everybody we care for wants us to find joy too. And that's an amazing question, by the way.
I think starting just by knowing that you have that feeling and that emotion is a good start. And for me personally, when I have something like that, I try to address what's making me sad, what is hard about it. and then that helps me to understand it. I think Ruth's point is give yourself that time. If it is hard, you know, he's cared for and loved, and you need to take care of yourself. And that means taking a little bit of time from seeing him. There's nothing wrong with that. I think also support groups are really good for that. I know at Vista, we're hoping to be able to do them again relatively soon. And that is a huge resource to realize you're not alone, and that you're with a lot of other people that are going through those same emotions, and to help cope with it.
And I also, one of the things we use a lot in this particular group is, I can't give what I ain't got.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost as a chant. I can't give what I ain't got. So if you need space and time, you got to take it. It's better for them in the long run, for both of you.
And I would finally add a sort of practical thing, which is in the same way that I think caregivers have to look straight into their own situation clearly. Part of the reason I think we start feeling guilty that we haven't visited is because we are we think a lot about time, you know, and we're used to the old ways where if you didn't call somebody every, you know, or didn't do this thing, they would think about it all the time. But if you're practical, you say, how much time do they understand right now? And then you remember, oh yeah, they're time traveling all the time. They don't know where they are in time. So that if you say, I'm going to accept what is, which is dementia, is you have no concept of time, and I can use this because I need a break. It's sort of a practical way of saying, yeah, I will come, and when I come, I'll be full of joy to see you, and that will be a great meeting. But I'm not going to come in saying, well, I've got 15 minutes to you, then I got to go. It's just really all about the relationship. It's not about time at all. It's about the relationship that you can have when you're together. Because for all you know, they won't even remember 5 seconds after you leave, or they'll think you've been there. You haven't been there in a year and a half, and you've been visiting every single day. So time is irrelevant in dementia, I think. You have to learn from them how to be as elastic as they are about letting it stretch. Yeah.
And a lot of times you have to accept that they can have a good life without you. I remember the first time I took a weekend off and left Morgan with his caregivers on respite. And I was so nervous that he would be so upset. He was glad. He was like, he went to the mall, he went to the movies. Me and the guy I went hiking with didn't have such a great time, but Morgan had a blast. And that relieved a lot of my guilt. Was like, okay, his life is okay right now. It's good. You know, I've also seen elders. It doesn't matter where someone's at in dementia, whether they can talk or not. You never forget how to guilt trip your kids, your wife, or your sister, ever, or your husband. You know, you just don't. You know how to do it. Guys, anything else? And we're kind of running out of time. So how are you guys doing? Check in. You guys okay? Let's
I'm
do
always
some.
amazed at what can be accomplished on Zoom.
Zoom's a weird little thing.
It really is.
And guys, I want to thank everybody on this call for what you guys have done, and for how it touches people, and for how brave and tough you are, because you guys really rock. Thank you very, very much. Oh, we've got a hand up, I think. Oh no, that's my mouse, sorry.
Valerie put a heart up, and that was even better.
So guys, let's do something really silly. I want you to kind of give yourselves a big round of applause and pat your back, as you guys really, really rock. And I'm going to teach you two things that Morgan taught me. He knew a little sign language and he was into sci-fi. So this is Live Long and Prosper. It's the Vulcan blessing. So live long and prosper. And this is I love you. Good day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruth, Luke, and Julie. We really appreciate you taking your time out to come and present and talk with all the caregivers that attend our trainings and programs. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it all.
And we should make both of them say goodbye too.
Yes. So if Luke and Julie would like to say something.
Just thank you for having Ruth. I know Ruth enjoys this. I was honored to be a part of it this month, and we look forward to doing it again. And I appreciate everything. Thank you, Laura, for your contributions today too. Very good insights. It was good to see you, Casey.
And thank you. I've really enjoyed putting the presentations together and giving them, and may be in person at some point.
Yeah. I'm actually blown away by those PowerPoints. Those PowerPoints were amazing. So if you haven't downloaded Julie's PowerPoints, do it, please. They're good. So
Yes, thank you all for everything. We really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone joining us. We Ruth does the dementia sessions, I think, about every 3 months. So she will be back again in a few months with a new set. Every 3 months she comes in and it's a new set of topics. So we hope you guys return again for that. Next month for April, we are the coalition, the Mexico Caregivers Coalition, separate from this, is doing kind of like a self-care leadership kind of sessions every Tuesday next month. So keep an eye out if you're on our newsletter list. We hope you come back for that. Sorry, Ruth, I heard you wanting to say something.
Also, there is a caregiver conference that is actually in person in Santa Fe through the Memory Care Alliance. And it is on Saturday, the 9th of April. And they are getting folks together for that in person. It is limited seating, but so try to get there if you can.
Yes, if anyone is interested, you should all have my email, since my email is the one that sends out the information for classes. If anyone's interested, please email me and I can send you the flyer for that conference for any folks that might be interested in registering for it. I do think that half this audience is outside of New Mexico and in the Arizona area, so that might be a little bit far for you to come. But if you are interested, let me know.
But if you can make it, do it.
I just want to put in a plug. I do Zooms for families who have just gotten a diagnosis of dementia and they need to know what dementia is. And I'm doing it by Zoom. So I go across the country in collaboration with another person who's been trained like myself in cheapest snow, positive approach to care thing. So we do an ongoing series every month. Next one is I think we still have room for one in April. So if anybody would like to get in touch with me, I don't know. I'll put my name in the chat. Is that all right? Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
Okay. If anyone would like my number, I can do it.
Also, if you want, you could send it to me and I can make sure to get it back to Laura.
That would be great. That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, if anyone's interested in learning more about Laura's group, feel free to send me an email also and I will get you in touch with her.
I also want to just say, one of the pieces to me coming back to myself was the work that I do and the people that I work with. And it makes a difference. Have people around you that you can talk to, that you can scream to, that you can call with questions. Find your family. Now, I have a few of them here right now, so life is good.
That's a really great advice, Ruth. I know some folks need to get going because we did go over time. So just an announcement regarding certificates. I will start printing all of the certificates for all of the month of March. I do a big group and I do a mail-in out. So I probably won't start getting them out until next week. It is very time consuming, unfortunately, and lots of folks have come to several trainings, so it's a lot of organizing. So keep an eye out for the next couple weeks. If they don't get to you within a month, then reach out to me and let me know. But with how much work it does take, unfortunately, to print them all, it could take a couple weeks for me to get them out to everyone. And I also try not to overwhelm the post office by mailing 100 sets of certificates at once. So, but thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We hope we see you in classes next month. And thank you all, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.